culture is really based on all the efforts of all of us, because it's really interesting that we are the people who brought gaming to life. We are the first gamers. We are the people who were completely involved in the birth of the gaming culture. And 100 years from now, people are going to look back on this time in history, and it's us that they're going to see as the faces of the people who brought to life the gaming culture, which has now become the biggest entertainment venue in the world. Because gaming is the backbone of, it's becoming the backbone of movies and music and sports and everything like that. Oh my God, it's Wonder Boy himself. Okay, so anyway, we're going to be up here for a couple hours showing you videotapes and stuff like that, but we wanted to begin. Okay, say hi. Okay, that's his version of saying hi. Okay, so we're going to start a whole bunch of stuff now, but we wanted you folks to join us in honoring people who have actually meant something to the historical progress, cultural development of the gaming thing. So thank you for bearing with us while we gave them their awards and their cards. I actually have to go get their cards and go give it to them now, but Billy has got a lot of stuff to say. That is, by the way, Billy, despite the way he was portrayed in the King of Kong movie, Billy is a very, very good human being. Even though he looks like one of those guys who's always trying to kill Bruce Willis.
Tell me the story if it's okay. I'll wait till he's off stage. The fact of the matter is, you look at everything you just saw here and the support and the inner workings of the gaming community today. But I always laugh. I go back to 1982, before I met Walter. What a wonderful life. But before I met Walter, I called Nintendo, and I said, hey, what's the world record on Donkey Kong? I mean, I called Atari for Centipede. I mean, I called. And I always got the same answer. Oh, we don't know. We don't keep track of that. And I got where they said, you need to call your local distributor. And I thought, wow, that seems odd. So I called the distributor. And I can still hear the guy's voice. He just laughed. We just collect the quarters, son, you know what I mean? Nobody had an answer. They didn't have any passion for gaming. They didn't care anything. They really did just collect quarters. And it was everybody, like the people in the crowd. It was everybody that Walter spoke of. It's all those things that come together that weave to create exactly what it is we have today. It's all that passion. All those old guys that collected the quarters, they're all dead now. And the fact of the matter, this is what's remained, and that's why the hobby carries on and carries forward. And that's why there's true value in this. And that's why there is a resurgence, as you say, because it's more than just the money, it's the passion, it's the friendships, it's the legacy that's being carried onward.
And so there's this producer out of St. Louis who has been just in love with the idea. He's close friends with us. He's been in love with the idea of getting together a crew of, producers and financiers and editors and stuff like that, and just follow us around the nation as we go and try and find specific games that are historically important. And when we go out and do this first round, it's a six series. It's 6 episodes for the show for this first season.
We've actually only done 1 episode. I was in Minneapolis at the Mall of the Americas where they were unveiling a Pac-Man scratch-off. So while we were in Minneapolis, we looked up a collector who happens to be, imagine he's a doctor from Cornell, and we're looking for a Defender. And he not only had a Defender, he had the definitive Defender, the Defender that Journey took with them on the road throughout the 1980s, every city they went to.
The music group, Journey, Steve Perry.
The Defender is signed. And next to it, he has the actual Journey machine that traveled with Journey on the road throughout the 1980s. So we don't just want a Defender, we want that Defender, that exact one.
So that's our adventures, going and finding this, going out different places in Minneapolis, and finally leading us to that game and trying to get that fellow to make the game available. Because we want to have these games there in Ottumwa in November, when we have the reunion of that famous photograph for Life magazine where there were 6 games in a row. One of the games is Defender, another one is Centipede, another one is Tutankhamun, and I think it was Pac-Man. And so we're trying to track those games down, but find the most amazing copy of each one of those games to have there for that reunion photograph. So we're in the process of chasing down these 16 guys who were in the photographs, 35 years ago. And it's funny, we just located 2 of them for the first time in 35 years. We lost complete contact with them, we could never find them. We just found them. So it's very promising that we could almost get all 16 of the original people who appeared in the photograph to come to the reunion in November. And possibly some of you folks can come to that because there'll be a big party.
Some of the 16 are a little bashful because their scores were a little controversial. But Walter can talk about that.
Oh, Billy can talk about that. Well, actually, a couple of people later on. It's interesting. I don't know if you folks have read stories about what it's like to be part of Twin Galaxy in the old day, but it was kind of hard to get some of the young kids to tell the truth about their scores. And so it was quite an interesting journey for me personally, because I couldn't believe that someone would lie about their scores. And it was kind of Billy who called a lot of these people on the carpet saying, you can't get that score, and then they'd finally admit that no, they didn't.
He's being nice to himself. He tells me a guy got 1.4 million and later 3 million on Donkey Kong. And I says, no, he didn't. He says, what do you mean he didn't? I know this guy, I met him, he's a nice guy. And I go, no. And he goes, nobody would lie about something like a video game score. And I go, you're kidding. Because as we knew when we grew up then, of course he's really old, he wasn't around then. But when we grew up, we're in the arcades. Arcades were everywhere. Everybody wanted to be the best. It was so important, it was all the rage. And for someone to be a big shot by saying they got a score was very possible. But someone of good heart wouldn't believe that. But it was really funny because I called this good guy and I had a conversation with him. It was very nice, and I just asked him a lot of questions and he asked me a lot of questions, and I called Walter back and I go, yeah, this guy's lying. He goes, he can't be lying. So I never told the guy that I thought he was lying. I never told anyone other than Walter. So for a few months, just this game of cat and mouse went on, and finally he's seated in front of me at Life magazine the night before that famous photo, and we're gonna play Donkey Kong. He plays first and he gets 190,000 points in his game, and to tell you how good that is, that would turn heads in any arcade in the world. You would be the center of attention. And the fact of the matter is, he finished playing and I thought, this is it. And he sat down next to me and we played. Remember, he got 190,000 in his game. I got 849,000 on my first guy. And it was that moment that forever put me in a death spiral of competitive gaming. I mean, it was quite a ride. But what was neat was, like I said, every game in the arcade was silent. All 17 eyes of the best players in the world were on the screen. And that was the absolute moment for me that I knew competitive gaming was for me. But again, we talked about the community and how good it is and what it's evolved to. Me and that guy are very, very close personal friends today. He's become a good friend. He is a real decent guy. He really is. And he says to me, he says in interviews, the only way he could beat Billy Mitchell was to lie, so he beat me. But he is a good guy, and so we got long past that. Of course, he's not the only one, but Walter will tell you more about them.
So remember, anytime you're doing something and you don't think you can beat Billy Mitchell, you just lie.
No, well, there was a guy who called at the moment I had the high score on Miss Pac-Man at 401,000. The guy calls the arcade. I happened to be there at an event, and he says, oh, my high score is 402,000. So they give me the phone. And I talk to the guy and I tell him I can help him with his score. I can help him get a higher score. But he's got to be truthful with me so that I know what level to begin speaking to him on. And I'm talking to him and finally he goes, well, my high score is 365. I talk and I'm explaining why he's not good enough to get 365. And he goes, well, I got 300. It took about 5 more minutes. I got him down to 214,000. And I said, I don't think you can get 214, but let's start there. Again, later he became my friend. He acknowledged his high score was 178. It was such a passion in the community to want to be the best. And that's what I pick on Walter for, that, you know, people wanted to be part of this inner circle.
You know what's really interesting, that the kernel of interesting information that's in that, is that the reason people were so driven to try and be the best is because, well, one thing, they would win other people's approval and love. I think I see it. And essentially, it would be, have you noted, does anybody remember this from their old arcade days, that when someone is a great gamer and they're standing in front of a game and they're getting a high score, how a crowd will gather around them? And the crowd will get bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, what's going on there is that video game playing, even back then, was the competitive spectator sport. There are people out there who are believing that the phenomena of paying spectators right now is a new phenomena coupled to this new age of esports. But that's the human nature of loving to watch someone put on a great show with tremendous video game playing, you know, skills. That's always been there. But what wasn't available back then was the technology to allow the person's performance to be viewed by other people around the world. I'll tell you, you know, right now they're having huge events with lots of spectators watching from a distance, paying good money to watch those people play. But if Billy Mitchell and all the other people back in 1982, if that same technology had been available, 100,000 arcades around the world would have signed up to watch Billy do the world record on Donkey Kong, other people do the world record on Miss Pac-Man. It's nothing new. The modern esports era is not creating spectatorship for video games. It's the human nature that was always there, but it was only able to manifest itself in each arcade in such a small, local way, because there was no technology available to allow the spectatorship to become what it is today. So, esports started a long time ago. It's just the technology that's allowing the sponsorship to get involved and be able to prove that their message is reaching the viewers and stuff like that. Just better technology is turning all the old things from all those years ago into what the modern iteration is now, is modern esports.
It was actually a lot of fun. You'd go to a small town where, again, video game competition was relatively unknown. You'd arrive at a location. I'm thinking of a place we were at in Michigan, where we arrived at an ice cream parlor, and we walked in, and there was 4 of us, and we just told them we were the best video game players in the world. They go, yeah. So we thought we'd start playing. So we started playing and playing and playing. Suddenly people called their friends, a crowd gathered. Suddenly there's 100 people watching us. And the guy at the ice cream place is getting mad because everybody's watching us play video games. Nobody's buying ice cream. And all we did was put 1 quarter, and he's not even making any money off the games, like Walter was talking about. So we would go to small venues, and we would see the crowd begin to grow. And that was the earliest vision of the things that happen today. At a later time, maybe Walter will tell you, or it's in his book, when we left the ice cream parlor, one of the girls that was kind of like a groupie in the area, she got her windshield broke, but Walter will tell you about that later.
Well, I don't know when this later is that he's talking about, but anyway, it's interesting. It's interesting how esports is growing today through infrastructure that's already in place, that's adopting it. And let me give you a parallel to show you what I mean. You won't believe why video games in the arcade room spread it as fast as they did. Thanks to the people who were the cigarette salesmen, believe it or not, back after about World War I era, lots and lots of families got into vending machines. So they would put coin-operated machines like jukeboxes, pool tables, and especially cigarette machines. Believe it or not, that's where they made most of their money, off of cigarette machines and vending machines placed all over the place. And as they began to put these machines more and more places, it developed a huge network, which was the vending machine network, which was run by many, many, many families back, before World War II, after World War I. And when video games were first created, it's interesting that that's the avenue that was chosen for video games to come into the public view, to come into the public domain. It was the people who were already making a fortune off of their cigarette machines, now started putting their video games in there and their pinball machines in there, right there, the same places they had cigarette machines and pool tables. So it's very interesting how the games, believe it or not, were brought to us by the people who made their fortunes on cigarettes, selling cigarettes. So it's a kind of interesting twist, you know? And now there's an interesting corollary going on. And I always thought that, well, this is easy to see how this will happen, but I never thought that this would happen. But what I'm talking about is the infrastructure that's in the world today that's now being used to spread esports further and further, is that all the professional sports teams, starting with like the Philadelphia 76ers and now lots of soccer teams and stuff, what they're doing is they're either buying esports teams that already exist or creating their new ones, and they're having them become like a corollary to their normal sports organization. So like the Philadelphia 76ers esports team will go on the road with the basketball team and play the esports team for the Celtics when they outreach Boston, or the esports team for someone else. So it's interesting how this infrastructure of professional sports now is signing up to be a next step for bringing competitive gaming further and further into the public realm. So it's a fascinating process to me, and lots of things like this are happening everywhere. And as industry, as music, movies, sports, are all beginning to have video games as a major componentry of their backbone of what they're doing. Talk about that. Do you want to come up, Ernie? Come on up. Ernest Cline, the author of Ready Player One and Armada. Ernie, so doesn't this stuff make sense that we're talking about here?
Oh my gosh. Thank you. I'm meeting two of my heroes right now, guys. There is no Ready Player One without Walter and Billy. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, kind of following these guys' exploits from afar, and the whole culture of competitive gaming, like no esports, nothing without these. Are we posing? I'm gonna stop talking and pose. But it's really, I've never met these guys before until right now, and thank you so much for this, the collector's card. It's pretty, I feel like a superstar hanging out with you guys. Can we get like a round of applause for these guys for coming all the way to Texas to share their awesomeness with us. But I grew up reading about Twin Galaxies, and I never made it. My wife is actually a world record holder right there. She's a Twin Galaxies world record holder in the Intellivision game Utopia. My wife Kristen, everybody. World record holder, Twin Galaxies for Utopia for the Intellivision. Give me a round of applause for her. And she's got a big crush on Billy Mitchell. So we're both geeking out, super excited. But thank you guys so much for inviting me to come up here, and I'm going to go back and listen. The movie comes out March 30th. Did you guys see Joust in the trailer? How awesome was that? Like CG eggs turning into ostriches turning in, but all of that, the whole culture of celebrating like the future of video games and imagining video games in the future, but it all started like 1982 in Ottumwa, Iowa, and I remember watching Chasing Ghosts over and over again while I was writing Ready Player One because it inspired me so much. So I'm so excited to have these guys here. And if you guys have time later, I would love it if you would come out and autograph my DeLorean that's parked outside. Awesome. All right, here you go.
That, you know, gaming as a sport and as an industry is sort of like a big pyramid where, you know, on the tip is always the most cutting edge, most forward-thinking, most highly involved, and the people who are paying the most for the technology and the involvement, stuff like that. So the tip of the iceberg is pointing in the direction of your plot, of your story. And it's not that far out from that already, because there's going to be...
Well, already this past Christmas was the first Christmas where you could buy virtual reality headsets commercially, both the Oculus and the Vive, and then the PlayStation. And this next Christmas will be the second one, and there'll be a few more headsets, but then Ready Player One is coming out. That's what's amazing to me about this movie that kind of explores the future of virtual reality is that it's coming out right at a time when virtual reality the technology is happening finally, and the book is inspiring people who are working on virtual reality. But because it's a Steven Spielberg movie and people all around the world see his movies, it's going to change the speed with which virtual reality is accepted and inspire people to get involved in it. And it really is the future of video games. It's amazing to be born at the perfect time to see Pong and Space Invaders and the birth of video games, and see it evolve all the way to now to 2017, where you can go in virtual reality and you can go into like a simulation of classic arcade games. Have any of you guys done this? Where you can walk up to a Pac-Man game and play Pac-Man in a virtual arcade inside virtual reality. It's amazing to see that arc and the way that even in the modern era of virtual reality, people are still celebrating classic arcade games. And that was what Ready Player One is about, imagining the far future of video games, but also having it celebrate the birth in the history of video games. The title Ready Player One, that comes from the game Black Tiger and a lot of other games when you would put in your quarter and it would say Ready Player One, and that was like the signal you were about to get sucked to do another reality. And so that was what I was trying to capture, and you guys were a big part in inspiring that. So
thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I talked earlier about how video games have evolved from the guys who collect the quarters, and the players were just portrayed as such losers, such morons, knuckleheads. Nobody ever glorified a video game player back then. I'm being honest here when I say I don't think a single manufacturer knew a single video game player's name except myself, because I was a nuisance. Not one, none. Well, it makes me reflect back the movie back then, if you saw it, and if you didn't, don't see it. Joysticks. And it was the sickest, I don't know, it was horrible the way a game player was portrayed, or the industry was portrayed. That's where it began, just like the industry began then. I talked about where the industry has evolved, and now look where the movies about the industry have evolved, and that's really, really a feather in the cap for Ernie here. It really is.
I do. That's so flattering to hear you say that. But I mean, anyone who's read Ready Player One knows there's a part where Wade finds an Easter egg and he has to play a perfect game of Pac-Man. Like, that whole section of the book, which is like essential to the plot, isn't without this guy. I have Wade do he beats your time. You can't beat Billy's score, because that's the maximum score possible, but all you can do really is kind of do it faster than Billy did it, which is what people race to do now, is to get a perfect Pac-Man game faster than he did. But and it's actually already incorrect in Ready Player One. The time, somebody's already beaten that time. So it's but yeah, so such a have you beat your fast time? But I'm Micah was telling me I need to see you play Burger Time. If I can get to see you play Burger Time, that it's like he breaks the game. He's so good at it. So if I can get
Will it get in the movie if I do?
I don't know. We're already finishing the movie. I don't know if I can get Steven to put that in. But we'll give it a big Ready Player 2. We'll put that in. But anyhow, thank you guys for letting me hijack your panel. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. What are we doing next, Dagan?
Sometimes Walter talks and talks. He talks. And he gets lost in the fact that we're supposed to do a Q&A. And we're supposed to turn it over to the audience, to anybody that has a question. Not only for us, but for even anybody that we've honored here, or anybody that would have any kind of question. And we actually enjoy the tougher, more controversial questions better. At least I do. So if somebody wants to be brave and raise their hand first with a tough question.
This guy does look tough. You're tough, I can tell.
1 second. When you do have a question, if you rush the guy with the microphone, and if you can take it from him, you'll be the next one for a question.
Just one for Billy. If you would have never played video games, do you think you'd be a mafia kingpin right now?
If you didn't hear him, he said, if I never played video games, would I be a mafia kingpin right now? No, I'd rather do something that takes a lot more guts than that.
Are you sure?
Yeah. The fact of the matter is, to answer your question, if I didn't play video games, I do have, in case you didn't notice, I do have somewhat of an obsessive personality to like detail and stuff. So I'm sure whatever I did, I would be obsessive at it. And if I can show just a little bit of ego here, if I was a fighter pilot, I'd be the best. Because I just have that passion. The truth of the matter is that in 1986, I sort of looked at myself and I realized I couldn't play games forever. I had to like get a real career. And I turned that same passion that I had in video games and I turned it towards a career that I was like obsessive at, obsessive in detail. If you ever dealt with me in the business world, I mean, I really did sit in front of people. I sat in front of a group. I sat in front of a board. I told them my history of gaming, and I told them what my business plan was for them. And I told them, I says, the chances of your success could not be greater for the fact that I'm sitting in front of you here now, because I wasn't going to let it fail. So the personality I have for gaming certainly runs over into my everyday life.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, I got a question. Billy, have you ever set a record at home on one of your home machines or something that you weren't able to reproduce, like with a referee, or like achieve some kind of amazing feat at home that you weren't able to reproduce in competition?
Okay, to expand the question a little bigger, the games that I have at home now and for a number of years now, the games I have it now altogether, the total is 0. I don't have any. I have an extremely normal life at home. I've gotten games, I've won games, I've bought games, I've been given games, and I've just given them out or loaned them out to friends. But I have done records in a private setting like you're talking about, and the truth is, other than like my very closest friends, I don't share the scores with anybody. Walter doesn't know them. He doesn't know my true high score on Donkey Kong, because back in the 80s, you had to travel to a location just like the Olympics. You had to travel there, you had to be prepared, you had to be ready, you had to show up on time, you had to compete, and you had to perform. An ice skater skates and skates and skates and skates their whole life, and it all comes down to 5 minutes on the ice. You're either going to perform or you're not. That's the way it was in the old days. That's the way Guinness demanded it. Guinness demanded it in order to accept the scores from Twin Galaxies. So the scores that I did, that I submitted, were either done at Twin Galaxies or at a Twin Galaxies event. But I've done scores at home, and yeah, there's some that I haven't been able to do. Maybe I could eventually do them, or I've done close to them, but no, there's scores I did at home that I can't duplicate. I had a guy call me on a particular game, and if I tell you the game, I'd let you know who the guy is. And he called me because he heard that I got such a score on a certain game, and he's a guy that I know and Walter knows and we respect very much. And I go, oh yeah, how'd you hear about that? Somebody was behind me filming it with today's technology, and they sent it to him. And he goes, well, how come you didn't say something? How come you didn't tell anybody? And I go, well, I did it on a machine. I don't know if it's an official board, and I kind of feel like I'm kicking him in the teeth if I just throw cold water on his achievement. It was only 8,000 points higher than what he had. So I just figure I'll do it in a grand fashion in a place kind of like this at a later time. Yeah, and then I'll kick him 100 times, believe me. I'm not bashful about that.
I wanted to ask both of you about Mr. Awesome Roy Schilt.
Who?
Roy Schilt from the movie, you know who I'm talking about?
No.
Okay, from King of Kong. Okay, from King of Kong. No? Well, what about Steve Wiebe? Do you have any, are you friends with him? Do you talk to him sometimes?
The truth is, there's nobody that I don't get along with and I'm friends with. You know, there's a small group of us that are in a tight relationship. But I do get along with, there's not anybody that I have crossed words with at all. And that's very contrary to what has been portrayed, and I probably shouldn't even say it, it's not good for my career. But no, there's nobody that I actually have crossed words with. If I don't like somebody, if I don't care for them, or their negative contribution, then they don't know it. I don't share it with them and I don't talk to them.
So, Jeff.
Hello. Will you be running the museum that you guys are collecting games for?
Well, no, I'm personally...
No, there's a goofy guy here who's doing that. He's here somewhere.
Oh yeah, well in Ottumwa, where Twin Galaxies originated a long time ago, the arcade's been closed for a long time, but there's actually an effort. It's actually a grassroots effort of the citizens getting together their resources and money and getting involved with the city to reopen the Twin Galaxies that's been closed for decades. Because in the video game world, it's a video game version of a historic site. So they want to get it up, and that's what they're going to be having it up for the big November event coming up. So people should consider that. That's a weekend, November 10th to 12th, to come to Ottumwa, Iowa, and be part of the reunion Photograph for Life magazine, the 36th anniversary of Twin Galaxies, the International Video Game Hall of Fame, having an induction ceremony for 2 consecutive years rolled together, and just a big video game party, all celebrating, hopefully, the reopening of the Twin Galaxies arcade, or an arcade that represents the Twin Galaxies heritage. So please consider coming to Ottumwa in November. This is a personal invitation from me and from Wonder Boy himself. Okay? So please consider coming.
Have you seen the Adam Sandler movie Pixels? And if you have, Billy Mitchell, did you know you were parodied in that? Maybe even caricatured?
First I heard of it.
Okay.
Yes, the truth of the matter is that Peter Dinklage is supposed to be me. I guess some things are similar, but my old joke is, what do you think of his performance? I didn't see the movie. I'm sure it was good, but I'm sure he came up a little short. That's my joke. But the fact of the matter is they did contact us, or contacted me about the movie, because all of the game footage that's in the movie, they needed to have it produced for the movie. And they wanted to know if I could put all the game footage, because it's at higher level on those games together, and I said, yeah. And they said, we'll pay you this much money. And I said, well, when it's this much, let me know. And we didn't make an agreement. But the fact of the matter is, you know, I guess he does have the right character, the right attitude, the right ego, the right sarcasm. He's, to be honest, from what I read, because I don't watch movies, but from what I read, you say Adam Sandler's movie, but really Peter Dinklage stole the show. That's what I was told. So.
Well, we got to tell you one of our favorite stories, and this is connecting to you, Lauren, and your accomplishment as the Tapper World Champion. So you played 24 hours? Let's talk about Jay Kim, okay? This is so much fun to us. Okay, imagine that you're playing...
This was at Twin Galaxies in the summer of 1983.
Okay. Who's ever played Cuber? Anybody ever played Cuber? Well, you may not know this, but from our perspective of having been the scorekeepers for all those years, we watched people play Cuber for 20 hours, 30 hours, 40 hours, 50 hours. It was amazing. And what happened in the case of each one of these competitors is that because of the shapes and the colors, they would begin to hallucinate more than they would hallucinate in any other game back from that era. So it's mind-boggling to watch how people degrade, as they word for it, when they play Cuber. So I'm thinking about you playing it for 24 hours, but our friend Jay Kim, by the second morning or the third morning, he's in about 40 hours, and the sun comes up, and he's trying to break the world record on Cuber. And now he's losing a lot of men because it's real hard, because the shapes and the colors change all over the place, and he can't really follow what to do correctly. Okay, and he's beginning to lose it. He's beginning to completely fall apart. And suddenly, 40 hours into his marathon.
Well, he had tried taking medication because his stomach was upset. He tried walking outside to let the sun get in his eyes to clear up a little bit, because he's dealing with very heavy color, a 3D effect, staring at the screen all night. He hasn't eaten food, he hasn't had any sleep. But now, as Walter says, it's 11 a.m. and people are starting to come into the arcade in order to play.
And at that moment when he's most fragile, anything will derail him. He's playing, trying to look at the screen.
Let me give you a little more. For example, on Cuber, he's running around the screen, jumping on the disc, riding it to the top. Well, I'm watching him play, he jumps around, he goes to jump on the disc again and he dies. And he goes, where the hell is the disc? And I go, you already used it. He goes, oh. So then he runs around, he changes all the colors green. And he takes his hand off the joysticks and he goes, what happened? I go, Jay, it's supposed to be yellow, not green. Oh, that's not green? That's yellow? And so he's absolutely physically coming apart.
And so at that most delicate moment, that most fragile moment, as he's staring at the screen playing, suddenly a 10-year-old girl reaches in front of him and slaps a quarter down on the screen. And he's startled. And he stares at the quarter and takes his hand off the joystick. And Billy says, "What are you doing? What are you going to play? What are you doing?" Because you're losing your men. And he says, "She put a quarter on the screen." And he goes, "What?" And he says, "She put a quarter on the screen." And he's completely falling apart now. And Billy turns to the girl at this most amazing moment and says, "You put a quarter on the screen?" And she says, "Yeah, and I'm next." So that was the end of his marathon. She was running interference lane. That's one of the fun memories we have back from the old days. So this is Pat.
Question.
Yeah.
One of my favorite moments in King of Kong is when you were asking the cameraman what you think the initials that you use on a game is. You had a picture with your tie, and he says TIE. I was wondering if you could, I have to admit I'm obsessed with your ties. Could you talk?
I got a whole collection in the back, I'll show you.
I was wondering if you could talk about how many you have, where you get these illustrious ties, when it started.
When it actually started, I was not a 9/11 guy. I was not. It started at Perfect Pac-Man or earlier. My nemesis, he was a Canadian guy. Again, he's a nemesis like the first Donkey Kong guy. And I don't want to tell you that I'm good friends with him now because I don't want to be a nice guy. But the fact of the matter is, he was goofy. He actually showed up, he's going to shake his head, yes. He shows up wearing a Canadian cape, and he calls himself Captain Canada. I mean, I'm not going to be that goofy. This is what I was going to do. And so the fact of the matter is, we met in May, and I hadn't played Pac-Man for 13 years. And so he had played continuously. And I couldn't believe, I guess I backpedal a little, since 1983 when I learned what a perfect score was and how to achieve it, me and my friend, we didn't tell anybody except Walter. I didn't put it together because I had to have the right environment, like I told you. But Walter was the only one who knew. And every once in a while over the years, somebody would call up and they'd say, "Oh, I can do a perfect score." And Walter would put him on the phone with me, and I'd ask him a half a dozen questions that nobody has the answer to, and they would just crash and burn and go away. Okay? Then this guy calls, him and his friend, and says, "Oh, we can do a perfect score from Canada." So I says to Walter, I go, "All right, well, we'll do a call and I'll just blow the guy away." I asked him a half a dozen questions nobody in the world knows the answers to, nobody. And he fired back every answer just as I would. And I told Walter, I said, "Wow, this guy's for real." And I thought, I've been sitting on my fanny all these years, not putting together what I knew was a perfect game that only I could do, and now someone's going to beat me to the punch. And so that's where the race for the perfect Pac-Man came. So we both showed up at Fun Spot, and I'm playing the game. We're rotating, and I'm playing, and I'm like, I have to get past board 21, and then it's a long stretch. And I got past it at like 360,000. I thought, oh, now I got to see if I can make it to 3.3 million. I was at 1,700,000 points, and I died out of nowhere a way I never died before. And I couldn't believe it. I just walked away from the machine, and now it was his turn to play. And he's playing, he's doing real good. He's past the 360,000. He's off and running. He was beyond 2 million points. And I'm being a nice sports watching like this. And finally, I was so disgusted and mad at myself, I walked away. Everyone's watching him play. The crowd's gathering like we're talking. I'm on the other side playing Bagman. And I heard that beautiful sound. He lost his guy. And I went like this. I'm glad there was no camera on me. And I ran around, I look in the machine, I go, he goes, "I don't believe it." And I go, "Wow, what happened?" "I died with 1 dot left on the screen." "Oh wow, that's too bad." So what he did that I didn't do though was he continued his game, but he had lost a man. So he got to the end, he got what would have been perfect if he had his last guy. When you don't have all your men, you get cheated out of 90 points at the end. So he was 90 points shy of a perfect score. Okay, then that was the end of that event. I woke up every morning, 30 minutes before I had to wake up, and I played. When everyone went to bed, I stayed up 30 minutes later and I played a game in my house. And I said, okay, I'm ready. I went back to Fun Spot on July 1st. That's Canada Day. I really didn't plan that. On July 2nd, I'm there, I'm playing, I'm not leaving. I got an open plane ticket. I'm gonna do a perfect score. I sent a press release out saying I'm gonna do a perfect score. I mean, I'd be ruined if I didn't do it. When Babe Ruth pointed at the wall, what made him different was he pointed at the wall and he hit the ball beyond the wall. So I put so much pressure on myself, I had to get it right. So on July 2nd, I get there, my first game, I'm playing, everything's easy. I'm off, I'm running, I'm past that 360,000 mark, and everything's just going smooth as can be. And this is it. And sure as heck, some little kid, kind of like you, he's wandering around the games, he's in the back, and he knocks the plug out. Wow, did I jump up in the air. And I feel real bad because the nice old guy that owns Fun Spot learned that I was there, came all the way down to Fun Spot. Right at that second, he walked into the arcade and says, "Hey Billy, how you doing?" He grabbed my hand, like, "I'm doing lousy." And he looks at me. And the kid took off running. I was so mad. Well, why don't you take a break? No, I'm not taking a break, I'm gonna do it right now. And I put the quarter and I'm gonna do it right then. But I mean, I'm all flustered. So for the rest of the day, I didn't put it together. The next morning, on July 3rd, I come back, and they had the game in a more secure area, and it's all roped off. And it's then that I put the quarter in, and I actually did the perfect score. But the truth of the matter is, there's about a half a dozen of us in the Pac-Man world that are here. But there's 2 of us that are here. He's the guy, without any help from me, he could have gotten a perfect score. The other ones would not have. He was the guy who was ready, and I regularly pick on him. He came 9 dots short. When I sign something, I sign it with my name. I make a little Pac-Man, and I make 9 dots. When I write him a letter or an email, you know, I'll say, "Okay, talk to you later," and I put 9 dots. I'm always digging it in. When I was in Japan on stage and got the Player of the Century Award, I sent him a picture. There were 9 cheerleaders. I mean, I'm just constantly digging it in. And again, we're good friends now. But the truth is, he did what I did. He died once. And he would have been before me. And it's only that person which is first that is remembered. You know, you'll ask who went to the moon and everyone says Neil Armstrong. You know, who flew across the Atlantic? Charles Lindbergh. Who was second? The second guy that got a perfect score on Pac-Man, does anybody, you be quiet. Does anybody here know his name? Okay, sorry. And then I pick on him. It's not my job to toot his whistle, that's his job. It's not my job to make the other guy feel good, that's his job. And I tell him, I say, "Why don't you come to the events?" So, but he's in Canada and he says that's not really a country, he's just sort of stuck up there. I got into this big long story. What was your question? Oh, I'm sorry. So he wears a Canadian cape, and this is as goofy as I wanted to be. And I happen to have a flag tie, so I wore it, and I wore it then. And when I finally got the perfect score, I'm standing like this, and I turned around, there's a reporter from the Boston Phoenix there, and he says, I said, bang, and that's that photo. So that's where the thumb comes from, that's where the tie comes from, and he says, "You did it, give me a quote." And I said, "I never have to play that damn game again." And that was my quote. But I'm gonna, again, I promised somebody I'd do another perfect score, so I'll do it again soon. And that's all. But it was really passionate at the moment. If you can imagine, the kid knocked the plug out, then they roped everybody off. So there's 100 people trying to stare into a little screen that's 10 yards away, and they're all like this. Well, I felt bad. I'm watching, and I mean, I got the joystick like this, and there's 2 boards to go, and there's this big dude in charge of security. And I look back and I notice how many people there are there, and I pointed at him, and I went to let the crowd forward. So they come forward for the last 2 boards, and now there's people standing and there's some of this going on, and I mean, they're running against me. But then the last board actually is easy. So I did the board. You want me to repeat that?
Has everybody seen the new movie that he's talking about Tim McVeigh's Nibbler score? It's called Man vs. Snake. Anybody see it yet? It's on Netflix. I mean, some people have seen The King of Kong, some people have seen Chasing Ghosts, and the third one is Man vs. Snake, and it's all about the history of twin galaxies and Ottumwa. So go on Netflix, find Man vs. Snake, because it's a fun movie, and it connects with some of the history that Patrick was just telling us here.
See, one of the things that I often talk to Walter about, and people who are around from the old days, I don't mean old, take it easy. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, I was there when Tim did his score. I was there at Life magazine. I mean, I was there. And the thing that I don't back down from when people talk about me, gee, I was at this show, you were there. Gee, you got to talk about this. Gee, you were in that film. What they're really saying is, why you? And I say, the reason why is no matter what happened in the day, no matter what the event was, no matter what, I was there. I couldn't get this lucky if I wasn't there. You know, my line is, as far as luck, whenever they spun the wheel around, I was there when the wheel went round. If I wasn't there, I couldn't get this lucky. You have to be good to be this lucky, but you got to be lucky to be this good. And the fact of the matter is, I regularly pick on people that are my friends, other players, who simply don't show up to events for no dumb reason. That's why they're not here. That's why they're not on stage with a microphone. That's why they're not in a movie. That's why their picture's not somewhere. It isn't by accident. You know, you work for it. And somebody asked earlier a question, kind of like, again, I do have some obsessions, as you might know, but people said to me, how does playing games translate into your everyday life? Well, my youngest now is 18, and I look back on it, him and the others, not one thing ever, I'm like, the proudest moment I have in my life, my kids grew up, like picking on my son for a second, Turkey Day, talent show day, first day of school, last day of school. I mean, I took a picture when I walked him in when he was 3 years old. His last day of senior year, he's wondering what I'm doing. He's a senior, he doesn't want nothing to do with me. And we walked to the hall like this and we did a selfie. I walked him in his last day. I never missed a single event, period. Oh, I'm tired. Tired? What's tired got to do? We were supposed to run and go somewhere. It didn't matter how late I got home, we went and we ran. If you don't go to the event, if you don't come here, if you don't participate, you can't get that lucky. You're not gonna get that lucky if you say, I'm tired. Gee, I'll do it tomorrow. And that's one of the things that separated me. When we talk about the awards that Walter gives, every person deserves that award. When you're up here, what you said, the reason why Walter likes doing this, and he says he's going to quit doing it, he's not going anywhere. He'll be doing this till he dies. He likes doing things for people. He likes recognizing their contribution. And now that it's in writing, it's on a certificate, it's history, it's on your wall, it's on the internet. No one will ever be able to steal that history from you. If he didn't do this, the smaller contributions that we all make to the one great hobby, you'd just be lost in the shuffle. We all would. But now it's history, and it's written. It'll last forever. He doesn't tell you. He has a certificate on his family's wall from an achievement they did back in 1862.
Wait, you're telling
So what you have on your wall, in 100 years, your family should be able to say, look what we did in our contribution to competitive gaming in the early days. Absolutely.
That's an important thing to consider. When we hand out these awards and these trading cards, even though this is your life and you may not think it's a big deal, future generations are going to be very, very intrigued by this group of people who were the ones who brought cyberspace and competitive gaming and just video gaming as an actual industry and sport and pastime. They're going to be intrigued by the fact that they're, like the awards we give out, as you just said, somebody will come in their house 5 generations from now and they'll see your award hanging on the wall and they'll say, what is this? And your ancestors, your descendants will be so pleased to say that my great-great-great-grandfather was part of the birth of gaming. So it's a very, very cool thing. Very cool thing.
You know, the days will come where they'll tell people stories about what happened here, what they did, and the fun they had, and what they contributed. And I'm just a real stickler for the fact that they have it here now, it's in writing. Because you would be shocked as to the number of people who want to go back in history and they want to rewrite history. They want to take something or change something or minimize something that you did to compete in the, or that you did in the industry of gaming. And that can never be done when we do things like this, and that's one of the reasons we do them. There's a guy named Todd Rogers who's a larger-than-life character in the gaming world. And in the early 80s, regardless of what the manufacturer said the perfect score was on Dragster, he beat the perfect score 3 times. He got a score 3 times. He got a score higher, or faster, excuse me, than what they said was possible. They saw it, they were there, they recognized it, players recognized it. Now there's a small group of people, not the manufacturing people, just a small group of people who weren't there when the wheel went round. They sat on their fanny and they weren't there at the competition. Now they want to rewrite history and say the score he got, he never really got. Why? Because they weren't there to beat it, to see it, and if they can rewrite it, they can have their name up there at a score that they did get because they participated at a more minimal level. That's why we like things written into history, so no one can ever change it.
I think that we're about to close the show here. Jeff, you wanted to ask a question? Was it a long answer? I can't remember what it was now.
What inspired you to be different than the quarter collectors?
When he met me.
Why did I become the scorekeeper? Well, I loved video games so much I opened up a video game arcade and I happened to call it Twin Galaxies, and within
he wanted to be able to play video games day and night. Well, if he's at his business, he can play them day and night and not have to do a job.
So within 90 days of Twin Galaxies opening up, I discovered that no one was keeping track of the scores on video games. And so we volunteered. I volunteered to be the scorekeeper for the industry, and we got support, and everybody said, yes, we'll put your name and your number by our Rolodex at the front desk, and anytime, this is what the manufacturers say, anybody in the magazines, anybody who calls up will refer them to you. So somehow overnight, we became the scorekeepers. It's something that you never could have expected, nothing you could have really made happen purposefully. It just was karma or fate or some sort of amazing.
Remember when I said I called all the manufacturers and they all said, oh no, we don't keep scores. Oh no, we don't know anything about that. Well, when somebody stepped forward and volunteered to do it, they then had somebody who they could pawn off all those calls, all those questions that came in. Guinness said they got more calls about video game scores than any other subject in their book. So when they could essentially assign Walter the duty of being a clearinghouse for high video game scores, it took the monkey off their back, and he was to do it. And the fact of the matter is, the first game was Defender. Somebody got a score in Twin Galaxies, and Walter thought, gee, nobody could beat that score, so he called Williams. And nobody had anything to say. And Walter said, well, okay, well, we're going to keep track, and we'll keep scores. And he said, just have anybody call us. He hung the phone up, and within minutes, he picked it up for somebody to report a score on Defender, because somebody followed up his call to Williams, saying, who do I report a high score to? So it just sort of fell in his lap, because nobody else wanted to do it.
So come and see us at our booth, and we'll tell you more about ChasingGames.com. If you didn't write it down, go to the Facebook page, ChasingGames.com, because when we do that reality TV show, we go on the road to find the games. We want you folks to come on that trip with us, because we think we're going to find some interesting stuff. We're going to try and find stuff that's historically significant, that is just valuable to bring back into the limelight. So thank you very much. I think we got to get out of the way because they got to start the next thing that's going to be up here.
What's the power glove do? It's cold. They made them just 81 and 82. And then they went out of business. But I'm going to sign right here. Which one's the best one? I got silver. Yeah.
It's like the sweet spot.
Okay, everybody ready?
Yes, sir.
Oh God, it's so hot.
I know.
Really, my hand.
Your skin will look
Now the door's locked. We can't get back. Oh, thank you.
I do that normally.
The great Billy Mitchell.
Yeah, here, let me give you silver one. Let me give you Walter's one. He's never going to be done.
Ernest, I love that you're a fan like us.
I'm a huge fan of these guys. This is Mike, who you just met. The four British who invented the Ottumwa computer games. This is a local game designer. Warren Robinette, who did Adventure. Yeah, Richard Gary.
I love Texas, especially in January.
No, he didn't make it this year. I think
Wait till August starts.
Yeah.
Man, that's too hot to touch.
Very hot. Very hot. Yeah, it's not love yet. I took the glove box and I met him to Hamlin. And
You hell of a time for it to run out of ink.
oh man, I think I got another one.
No, it's going. You just have to shake it down.
Okay.
It's working upwards, you know.
Yeah.
So, I've earned the point of 107 degrees and a tux and being a prima donna. I'm like,
Awesome.
You're a good man, Joe.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes, sir?
Look up the temperature on your phone. Someone look up the temperature. I think it's 106 now.
Oh, yeah. Heat index is like 106 or 107.
Thank you, Billy.
It's hot.
Oh yeah, sure. This is where Steven Spielberg signed it. It's here on the glove box lid. Yeah, it's on the glove box lid. What I did is I screwed it to LA. Yeah.
Billy, can I want to ask you a question real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
The term Billy Badass, is that referring to you?
No, that's much too nice a term. I would never go for that.
Okay.